wonder which of these things has happened to you this year. Have you had a birthday? Have you had to cancel your birthday party? Have you got to spend lots of time with your family? Have you had to spend less time with your friends? Some of these things are good things, but some of these things are bad things. Over the last few weeks, we've seen a lot of different things that have happened to Joseph. Can you remember any of them? We saw Joseph's father giving him a beautiful coat because he loved him so much. We saw Joseph being treated unfairly and being sent to prison. We saw Joseph being forgotten in prison. And then we saw him interpret Pharaoh's dreams and be raised up to be the leader of all of Egypt. Now we're seeing Joseph's brothers have come to get some food because there's no food in the land. Over all these stories, we see that sometimes, or some things that happen to Joseph are good things, and some things are bad. Getting the coat from his father and becoming the leader of Egypt are really good things. But being sold into slavery and being forgotten in prison were really bad things. Last week, Hannah talked about a choice that Joseph would have to make. When he saw his brothers and remembered all the bad things that had happened because they sold him, he had to choose whether to ignore his feelings, to stay angry, to get revenge, or whether he would forgive them. We left the wheel spinning. Let's find out where it lands. Joseph chose to forgive his brothers. In the video we saw today, Joseph told his brothers who he is, and he tells them that he will forgive them. How can Joseph forgive his brothers when they did something so bad to him? Well, we see in the passage in Genesis chapter 45, verses 5 to 7, says, "Don't be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now, there has been famine in the land, and for the next 5 years, there will be no ploughing and reaping. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance." Joseph is able to forgive his brothers because he sees that all the things that have happened to him, all the good things and all the bad things, were part of God's plan to save Joseph's family when there was no food. What amazing news! When Joseph was sold, God was in control. When Joseph was in prison, God was in control. When Joseph interpreted Pharaoh's dreams, God was in control. All these things were part of God's plan to save his people. A little while later in the story, Joseph's brothers get a bit worried that Joseph might change his mind. He might blame them after all and want to get revenge. But Joseph says to them in Genesis chapter 50 and verse 20, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Joseph sees that even though his brothers wanted to hurt him, and even though it led to some very bad times, God was in control. And did you notice what Joseph said about why God did all of this? It was to save his family, save the lives of God's chosen people. God was working even through bad things to save his people. We see the same thing happen again in the Bible when we read about Jesus. Jesus faced some really bad things. People hated him, and it meant that they treated him very badly, just like Joseph was treated badly. But even worse than Joseph, Jesus was killed by the people who hated him. But Jesus didn't stay dead. He rose from the dead, and we are able to see now how God was in control. And just like Joseph, all of the bad things that Jesus faced, even his own death, were all part of God's plan to save the lives of many people. Jesus' death was part of God's plan to save me and to save you. When bad things happen, it can seem like God isn't in control. When we have to cancel our birthday party and not see our friends, it can seem like God doesn't know what's going on or how we feel. When bad things like a virus mean that we can't do what we want during half term next week, it can feel like God has forgotten us. But through this story in Joseph and through the death of Jesus, we can see that God is in control, even in the bad things. And we can trust that God is in control because just like God knew everything that was happening to Joseph, he knows all of our ways and he knows just what we're feeling too.